This is a deck profile for a deck that I like to call Telefon P.U.N.K FTK, which is now legal as of POTE. And as you would assume from the name, it aims to FTK using a card named Morphtronic Telefon that you have probably heard of. Because, well, this card reads like it was printed before they learned from Infernity's mistakes, as there is no hard ones per turn on a monster that can revive itself infinitely. And, well, you can imagine this is ripe for abuse, especially with a card that I'm sure you recognize from many in FTK, Cannon Soldier, who is actually old but still has no once per turn and inflicts burn damage infinitely. As I'm sure as you can imagine, these two together create a problematic deck, if not a good one. And as for the card by card, well, 3 Morphtronic Telefon, as you need one in the grave and one in the hand or field to do the FTK. The deck also uses 3 Gizmak Naganaki, which is basically 3 more copies as it can summon Telefon directly from the deck. It is also a light monster, which is relevant for extension. The deck plays 1 Cannon Soldier, as it is pretty easy to get into the graveyard or field through your combo, and you don't need more than 1. If your only Cannon Soldier gets DD crowed, then, tough luck. Then the deck uses the P.U.N.K engine as a mill engine and for extension, as this engine can very efficiently summon Chaos Rule the Chaotic Dragon, which I'm sure you recognize from P.U.N.K deck lists. Mills 5 and adds a light or a dark, as well as Zombie Vampire, which also mills 4 and summons. As you can see, there's also a Danger engine in this deck list. This is mostly to summon level 8s for Xyz and Synchro plays, and extension with the level 4s. The last part of the main deck is what can be pretty much considered generic extenders: Jet Synchron, Destrudo, Fairytale Snow, Reborn, and 1-for-1. These are all just to get more bodies on the field and have certain levels and modulation to get to your extra deck monsters. Now, the extra deck is where things get more interesting, as the main deck is pretty self-explanatory. Extend and summon monsters until you get a Telefon on field, Telefon in graveyard, and a Cannon Soldier on field. And the extra deck is also built to do that very efficiently. The first start of it is Link Karibo and Relinquish Anima, and these are important as they are monsters that allow you to link over Telefons that you've already used to summon other ones. And this is important for getting different names for links, and making sure your Telefons are not banished for Trishula. Of course, there's Halki Fibrax, as he allows you to extend very far with cards such as Jet Synchron, and get certain levels on field when you need them. Cross Sheep is a very important link monster, as its effect to summon a monster from grave when a fusion is summoned to its zone is very important to get a Telefon or a Cannon Soldier onto the field. Of course, you do this with Trishula the Dragon of Icy Imprisonment, as this means if you get 5 monsters on field, you can summon this and Cross Sheep, and reborn whatever monster you need. The next monster in the extra deck is Curious the Lightsworn Dominion. This is a Foolish Barrel from the extra deck that can be made with pretty much anything in the deck. The Danger engine especially is very good at summoning Curious. This is great for getting a Cannon Soldier or a Telefon into the graveyard when you need it. Access Code Talker is very good if you're going second and need a way to get some good attack stats on field, as this deck, as you can imagine, struggles going second. Or if you just need some link fodder to get some different names for a card like Yugioh. Fireball Dragon is actually very important, as not only does it let you put up some interruptions and board breaking if you're in a pinch, it also allows you to recycle monsters from grave to hand, which is important if you need to, say, summon a Telefon to the field, and you have a Yugioh, you can use this to add it to your hand, and use Yugioh to put it on the field. Yugioh Skull Dread is incredibly powerful, as I'm sure you can imagine. It lets you draw through your deck and summon from your hand to the field, which allows for more extension and getting the actual combo off. Degares is also very good, as it's pretty much the same, where it allows you to draw and discard, triggering effects, and summon from the graveyard. And it's not too hard to make because of the Dangers and Fairytale Snow. the Zombie Vampire is, well, as I explained earlier, it allows you to mill 4 and summon one of those milled cards, and this can be Telefon, Cannon Soldier, even a level 8 if you need to get 3 level 8s. For this card, which you might not recognize, Coach King Giant Trainer. It requires 3 level 8 monsters, and you can up to 3 times per turn detach an Xyz material, draw a card, and then burn damage if it's a monster. And you cannot conduct your battle phase, which isn't relevant for an FTK. This card is incredibly strong, as not only does it let you do burn damage to get the FTK quicker, it draws through a deck, and it's very easy to summon. Borreload Savage Dragon is there in case you're going first and need to put up a negate for a hand trap or just something in the FTK went wrong. It's not extremely important. This in-access code can be cut for any amount of extension if you want to. Chaos Ruler is basically the backbone of the deck, as it lets you mill 5, add one of those, and reborns itself from graveyard, so you can either make Zombie Vampire or a Giant Trainer. It is also very easy to make with both the P.U.N.K engine and a combination of Dangers and Tuners. Karaka Dragon is easy to make with level 8s, such as the Dangers and P.U.N.Ks and, Chaos Ruler, as well as a level 1 Tuner, which thankfully Telefon is. This lets you draw a card and is an interruption if you're very desperate. And as for the side deck, well, this is the panic when you're inevitably going second. It is full of blowout board breakers and back row removal, because this deck just does not have the extension to afford playing hand traps. It needs to draw 1 board breaker and win off of that, or else it's not winning going second. And all the back removal is because this deck has an interesting time against lots of back row and can't beat floodgates. There's very little in-engine removal. One advantage of the deck is it is extremely consistent going first, provided there's no interruptions, as almost any hand can end up producing the FTK at some point as long as your mills and draws are decent. And generally turns will go like this, summoning something like Xiamen, and of course doing the standard P.U.N.K lines. You will want to try and cycle through each engine as much as you can to get as much fuel in graveyard for cards like Snow and Chaotic Ruler, as these are very valuable. And of course any way to get to Chaos Ruler is very good, because the card basically turns your entire deck online. And of course, I'm sure you probably recognize this combo line pretty closely, as this is more or less standard for P.U.N.Ks. This is where things can differentiate, as I have 2 level 8s and could go into Zombie Vampire, or if I want to extend more early on and say be more defended against an Ash, I can instead go for a Danger Bigfoot play. This puts 3 level 8s on field for Giant Trainer. Using Giant Trainer's effect, I can detach and draw, so you have good on to Cannon Soldier. And if you're concerned about dangers, say discarding an important card, the nice thing about this deck is for the most part, any deck card in the deck can be discarded with no real problem. The worst hits might be a monster reborn you wanted and you can set that, but a card like Cannon Soldier or Telefon, or honestly, you realistically want them to be in the graveyard, and if you don't, they're not hard to get back. As you can see, my hand has been refilled, and so from here I have a couple different choices, but first, I can use Chaos Ruler, banishing the light and dark, to put it back on the field. At this point, I want enough for level 8 in field, so I can use Monster Reborn to reborn any of the level 8s in the graveyard. In this case, it'll be Danger Bigfoot. Then go into Zombie Vampire. As you can probably tell, the goal of this deck is to just vomit as much monsters on the field and graveyard as possible, until you can eventually get to your setup. So here I can use 1 for 1 to summon a Telefon, and I mill the Telefon during that process, so I can use Telefon to reborn itself. As you can see, I can now summon into Skuldread. Use its effect, you draw 4. At this point, the draws don't really matter. The FTK is already online. Use Yugioh to special summon Cannon Soldier from the hand. then use Telefon, and now the loop has begun. As of a Telefon on field, Cannon Soldier, as well as a Telefon in the graveyard to loop, you can infinitely use Cannon Soldier, and one thing to remember is that you must always remember which Telefon you just spent. With Cannon Soldier, you can just begin tribute monsters and using the loop. And this loop does take a while, but thankfully, Giant Trainer's burn damage can definitely help shorten how long it takes, and if you're very efficient at clicking, or, playing cards in real life, if you choose to play this in real life, it doesn't take too long. Now, of course, most hand traps do hurt this combo, but especially if your opponent waits for Cannon Soldier to left field, they can Effect Veiler or Imperm them. And this is why you might want to summon, if you have an extension, a Borreload Savage or an Appaloosa, if you want to run that, to prevent that from happening. Even though most players will probably just hand trap the deck very early on, and that can often just work if you don't have enough extension or a bad hand. This deck can usually play through a hand trap or two if the hand is especially good, but anything beyond that and you're pushing your limit. Of course, that is expected of a, FTK deck, as these are not known for being hand trap resilient, especially not one as consistently powerful as this one for doing FTKs. As you can see, the combo line is just this, looping the two Telefons and Cannon Soldier until you burn your opponent to death. You can see there's the FTK done, as well as enough extension left in my hand that I could have played through interruptions if my opponent had had hand traps of any kind. As well, since I got the FTK out so early, my extra deck's pretty full for follow-up play if for some reason the FTK does not resolve. And that about sums it up for this deck list. I didn't go into specifics because for Telefon P.U.N.K, it's pretty customizable. You just need a lot of extension to get a Telefon in graveyard, on field, and a Cannon Soldier on field. So if, you're using this deck profile and you want to make any changes, feel free to. The deck is very malleable, very unfinished and early, and up to preference really. As far as how much you should expect out of this deck, I would not expect to really top any tournaments of it, as a smart side deck of really any kind can easily get rid of it. It struggles going second, and just in general, it's a gimmicky FTK deck. It's not that good. But for FTK standards, the deck is extremely consistent, can play through a decent amount of interruption, and with upcoming support has the potential to be more powerful with cards like the new Dark Lord cards, or Dark World. And so if you want to have some fun on Yugioh Pro or Dueling Book and be a douche of an FTK, feel free to. I would not bring this in person to something like a locals, because not only is it not very fun to deal with at all, it's also a pain, because you have to mill and search and summon a ton and be very specific, and loop cards over and over and keep track of life points and die rolls. It's mostly an experiment, and if you bring this to locals, good luck.